Ladies and gentlemen, the presentation is starting. Sal, please go ahead.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for our web seminar, Simplify Monitoring Applications Across a Hybrid Data Center. I'm Sal Salamone, Specialist Editor at Quinn Street Enterprise. And today, I think it's a very timely topic. I think all of us have been looking at issues about monitoring application performance across hybrid data centers where we're looking at both physical, virtual, and even cloud resources that are impacting the performance of applications. A lot of times it's very difficult to sort through and find the resource issues, where the bottlenecks are. So I think today's talk will give you a little bit of overview of what the challenges are and some best practices and some ideas on how to address these issues. Today I'll be joined by our speaker, David Leith. Hi, David. How are you today?
I'm doing just fine.
So David's product manager at Uptime Software, and he's going to do the bulk of the presentation. We'll have throughout this presentation a couple of things, some poll questions, an opportunity for everyone in the audience to ask questions, and also more importantly, David, I believe you guys are supplying a number of resources that can be downloaded at the end.
That's correct. There's a final slide with a series of available resources and next steps for everyone. Great.
So before I let you start, I just want to go over some of the things with our console with the audience. Looking at the crowd, I can see that some of you have been to our seminars before, but bear with me for those who haven't. One thing I'd like to just sort of note is that we do want this to be an interactive presentation, so we encourage you to ask questions throughout. We'll have time for a Q&A at the end. There's a lot of detail in many of the slides here. If you don't want to spend time jotting down every little note, we do have a copy, a PDF of the slides you can save to your hard drive and have that for during the talk or after. Just use the save to folder icon. In that folder, that's where you'll also find these other sources, these other resources that are being provided. If you want to share your thoughts throughout the presentation with colleagues or friends, you can use our social media tools that are widgets that are built right in. You don't need to leave the console. And then finally, at the end, we have a survey that we'd love to, if you could participate in. We have a couple of questions about the topic of today's seminar. We just wanted to get some idea where the audience stands. Now with that, I'll turn it over to you, David.
All right, thank you very much. Hello to everyone. I'm very excited to be here today and talk through some of those best practices and challenges in trying to monitor applications in your hybrid data center. Sal mentioned this is a very timely topic. There's a lot of organizations going through some challenges with this right now. And today what I'm going to share is some kind of a field example from a target user of Uptime that we were working with recently. And his experience matches that of dozens of different users we've worked with before. So I'm going to be talking through some examples with a person named Sam. Right. So Sam is very much like I'm sure many of you. Right. So he's working at a financial institution. They have about 2,000 servers that are a mix of Unix backend servers, different virtualization platforms, some stuff pushed out to the cloud. And he was introduced to the company as an IT manager, primarily responsible for the virtualization backend. And he was responsible for really just migrating a number of their critical applications off of a physical stack into a more virtualized environment. And that meant pulling apart several of the different components and distributing workloads across different internal and external virtual resources. And of course they were doing this because everyone wants to move to a hybrid data center and to the cloud and utilize virtualization for better performance and availability in their data center. Now, the reality of these transitions can be a little bit different. So through this project, Sam had a number of challenges, and really a lot of them boiled down to simply just having inadequate monitoring throughout the transition. So a lot of organizations will try to use their existing tooling or all of their old processes as they're migrating things through this big transition to virtualization into the cloud. And they find that it just really doesn't always work. It doesn't always deliver on all the promises that they were hoping it would. So the impact for Sam was that there was really just a perceived application performance degradation in the environment. So many more complaints from end users, from different stakeholders who are involved with a number of the critical applications. And I say perceived application performance degradation here because he really didn't have the tools in place to actually validate whether performance was really being impacted or not. It was all word of mouth and kind of gut feel and basically just following the email chain of angry users. So the result for him was that really the IT department took a big reputation hit, and they spent countless hours just trying to manage the problems involved in this migration versus actually getting to that net gain of better service delivery and improved performance. So I'm going to talk about two broad categories where we helped Sam to improve the whole process of monitoring his hybrid applications and migrating from the traditional stack to the new modeled virtualization stack, including resources across physical, virtual, and cloud assets. I'm also going to talk a little bit about how he's able to improve IT performance through effective reporting on the availability of his applications back to the line of business and back to the users within his IT department. So there are four specific things that we worked with Sam on to help him ease his way into this hybrid monitoring. So we talked about building a single view of his hybrid infrastructure, so he's able to see availability information across all of his different resources. We talked about monitoring application components holistically to get one version of application availability. We also addressed some of his capacity reporting challenges around reporting on different architectures in the hybrid environment, and then also talked about automated discovery and migration synchronization to help ease some of the manual overhead that they were having with some of their legacy tools and weren't really ready for the transition to a dynamic hybrid environment. So the first piece we talked about was really just building a single view of the hybrid infrastructure. So Sam's environment was very typical. They had about 8 different monitoring tools responsible for each of the different silos within their environment. So the network team had their own tools, the storage team had their own tools, the operations team had their own ticketing tools and different availability views. And the result was really just a great deal of confusion about where different issues were happening, about how things were processed between the different tools. And from Sam's point of view as the IT manager, he just could not go to a single console and find that one unified version of the truth in their environment. So one of the first things we worked with him on was implementing Uptime, which provides a single unified IT dashboard that allows you to monitor, alert, and report across availability, performance, and capacity for all of your applications and IT services, all of your network devices, virtual servers, physical servers, and cloud resources, bringing that all into one view so that if you're looking at the application or looking at a high-level dashboard, you're able to see instantly at a glance, what's the status of my environment? I don't have to go around several tools. I don't have to chase down specific teams or specific groups to troubleshoot issues. Everything's in one view. So one of the example dashboards that we worked to configure for Sam was what we call our global scan dashboard. And this type of dashboard is interesting because you can see it's very high level, and what it provides is just a simple view, up, down, basic performance information across all of those applications, all the core network devices, different SLAs, which I'll talk about later in the presentation, Unix infrastructure, VMware environment. Everything's brought into this one console. So in a perfect world, everything here is green, right? But the reality in this environment was that we do have a number of different warnings and critical events going on, and we can drill down into them from this one dashboard, again, without having to jump around to a number of different tools. So getting to the stage of having one dashboard can be pretty daunting. It can be very political at environments, because certainly each little team wants to have their own tooling, and then they are attached to their own tool sets. But what really becomes apparent when you're transitioning to a highly dynamic environment is a lot of that complexity and overhead just lost in maintaining all of those different tools. So getting yourself to a stage where you do have that one monitoring tool that can look at your entire environment is essential to make sure that you can focus on moving your IT department forward and having more effective delivery of your IT services. The second thing we talked to Sam about was about how to monitor his application components in a way that made more sense to the business. So I've simply drawn out a basic architecture map here that is very standard in hybrid environments. So you have a series of physical servers, maybe your DB servers are physical, your SAN devices, right? Various network components. Then you have a virtualization stack housing some components of your environment. And then if you're more advanced, you're starting to push things out to the cloud as well. And when you take an application and spread it across all of these tiers, it becomes very difficult to really view the overall holistic status of that application. We prefer to refer to this as an IT service. So we worked with Sam to build views that were able to pull the various components of these distributed hybrid applications, and instead of treating them as individual components, treating the entire IT service as something that is up or down. So being able to monitor and look at this from the end user's point of view and show status in a way that makes sense to the business users and the end users versus simply reporting on the database tier being available or the application tier being available. We want to take all of those different components, monitor the infrastructure pieces for them individually, but then wrap them up into a higher level application or IT service and track the overall health of that application at that higher level. So an example of some of the screenshots or the dashboards that we were able to set up for Sam, we were able to provide a simple high-level view right at the top section of this that is able in a single line to show to the end user what is the status of these IT services. So this isn't infrastructure. This isn't just the virtual pieces or physical pieces or cloud pieces. It's all of the different components of each of these IT services wrapped up into one status dashboard that could be displayed within a NOC environment or available in some sort of internal portal or client portal to show the health of each of these services. And from this view, you can easily see, for example, our email infrastructure is failing, and our e-commerce website has a warning event, so the service is up and running, but there's some sort of performance degradation that we may want to go look at or resolve before moving on. And from here, we can drill down directly to see each of the components of this failing application. So in this example, we're looking at more details around the email infrastructure, and we can see specifically that there are a number of different servers and probes that are up and running for this application, but the thing that's failing is actually the most important piece. That's an email check that is actually trying to send a real email through the email infrastructure and then retrieve that email out the other end and validating that that's functioning. So in this case, we actually have all of our servers up and running, but something is just fundamentally down in that end user experience, and users can't get their email, they can't send email. This type of view allows you to pinpoint where in each of these applications the failure is, drill down to it, and focus on resolving the problem instead of trying to navigate around several tools and trying to figure out where that root cause is. So an interesting article was published by Track Research recently where they noted that organizations that are able to get to this higher level view, this kind of end-to-end view of applications and the understanding of the relationship between the components, they're 89% more likely to be able to prevent issues in their applications before they actually impact the end user. So that's an incredible number. If you can think about the number of raw incidents, the amount of time spent troubleshooting issues for all of those things that you couldn't be proactive about, and clearly getting to this type of view across your hybrid environment will save a tremendous amount of time and help improve all of those IT delivery markers and improve your service delivery to your end users. The third piece that we worked with for Sam was all of it is capacity reporting. So he was very comfortable in reporting on capacity across his IT services and applications using specific tools for each of the technologies. And it worked really well. In his case, he had, had a P-series backend running the databases and a very basic kind of Linux Intel front end running the rest of the components. And when the architecture was simple, it made a lot of sense. He could just run 1 or 2 reports, get the capacity across all of those servers, and he was happy. But as soon as he started transitioning all of these components across a variety of different architectures, the simple capacity reporting across the IT service became very difficult. So as components migrate, you must be able to report across all of the architectures consistently. Uptime provides this by allowing you to pick any collection of different servers in your environment and view the CPU usage and memory usage in consistent terms. So in this example, you can easily report on Spark systems beside Intel systems, beside Power systems, whatever components you have in your IT service and applications, and see immediately where the bottlenecks are. What's the workload in peak hours versus off-peak hours, and which component in this IT service is most likely to fail next if we don't get the appropriate hardware resources allocated to the applications. The second key thing was being able to compare application workloads across all of the different servers versus the application metrics that are important to the end user. I've just pulled up a few screenshots where on the left we're able to see 2 different cluster nodes, in this example running the Active Directory authentication environment, and we're able to see that clearly there's a workload spike on the first node that isn't also on the second node, so we'd want to go and troubleshoot that. And we can also try to relate that back to some of the key email processing metrics. Right? So in this example, we have the response time over all of that synthetic email check, so how long is it actually taking for an email to go through this whole process. We have active client logons, so how many people are logged into the environment right now, and then just simply the response time for this application. So this example, of course, is specific to that email IT service I've been talking about, but there's a variety of different metrics that you'd want to be checking across different application stacks. Now the last piece to help ease the burden of hybrid monitoring really comes down to all of the manual tasks that used to be okay in a non-hybrid environment, a non-dynamic environment, but now the reality is that everything is changing too quickly. Right? So simple tasks such as discovering systems, adding them into the monitoring loop become much more complicated when everything is shifting around constantly and you don't necessarily know what physical resources virtual workloads are actually bound to at any given point in time as they shift around the environment. So there are a few things that Sam didn't have that once implemented saved a great deal of time for him. The first was just automated initial discovery and the ability to sort elements into different groups and different views based on parameters about those systems. So virtual hosts go into a virtual discovered folder, VMs go into a different folder in the view. It allows a quick triage almost of simply sorting all of the new things going on in your environment. And then also essential was rolling out monitoring to those different types of devices in the environment automatically. Right? His administration team was spending hours each week just simply trying to keep the monitoring tooling in sync and up to date with the real changes in the environment. And they just couldn't keep up. Right? So without this automated initial discovery, what ended up happening is that anytime they looked at their monitoring solution, they wouldn't have everything in that dashboard or in that view that actually represented the environment. So they always had blind spots in their dashboards and were never quite confident in their monitoring solutions and that they were actually checking everything they were supposed to check. So having an automated initial discovery helps greatly with that importing of mass environments. Then we have something called active discovery. So we want to be able to keep that monitoring inventory immediately in sync. So as VMs are motioning around, powering on and off, or ESX hosts are coming up and down, keeping track of cluster health, all of that should happen automatically. There should be no manual intervention to keep your monitoring in step with your changing environment. So those are four basic steps to help ease the hybrid monitoring that may not be immediately obvious. So of course, in any hybrid environment, you want to make sure that you're monitoring to start with. You want to make sure that you're monitoring all of those, let's say, operating system level metrics as well as application metrics. These four things are things that are somewhat overlooked in this transition that a number of users will get caught on, and it ends up directly impacting the performance of their IT services. So those four pieces again, we're building a single view of the hybrid infrastructure, having one tool that will monitor everything in your environment and everything in the cloud, having all of that information presented in a single dashboard or a small set of dashboards, monitoring your applications not just at the infrastructure level, but bringing them up a level to the IT service as viewed by the end user, and being able to look at that service holistically and quickly identify is it up or down, and if not, or if it is down, which sections of that application are failing. Looking for an easy apples-to-apples way to do capacity reporting, so being able to compare workloads across different architectures of different chip types and accurately report on those capacity numbers so that you can plan for upgrades and future capacity needs. And then automating the discovery and migration process within your hybrid environment. If you're able to do all of the basic monitoring that you likely have in place and do these four things, you're going to be much better off at the end of the day. So I think we're going to take a moment to pause for a poll.
Yes, that's right. If we can push out the poll question. Just to get a sense of where everyone in the audience stands, how many tools are you using to monitor your hybrid data center? So select the single best answer. Are you not monitoring? You have lots, 10 or more, a handful, 5 or more, a small set, 2 to 4, or just a single tool that works across the whole data center. So David, while folks are voting, I just want to remind people a couple of things. Continue to send in your questions. We also just want to remind you we have a resource folder. If you open that, you can get a PDF of today's slides, but you can also find in there some other resources. There's a link to a free 30-day free trial. You can download the software that we're talking about today. There's also some other resources. There's an IT systems monitoring checklist that you can get to, and there's also an IT systems monitoring cost calculator tool. So check out the items that are in that resource folder. So I think that's about enough time. David, any guesses? What do you think?
This is actually pretty much on par with what we see kind of out there in the real world, right? So the small set number is actually a little bit higher than normal. We find that a lot of users have at least 5 plus. And something more surprisingly recently was that the number of organizations falling into that lots bucket, so 10 plus, was actually found to be about 18% of all data centers, right? So that's really just an incredible number. So thinking about the inefficiencies and the challenges of managing availability across 10 or more different tools, it really drags on your efficiency in being able to actually recover your services.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm going to turn it back over to you. I'll join you for the next poll question. And as I mentioned, people in the audience, please continue to send in your questions for our Q&A at the end.
All right, so the second big piece that we worked with Sam on was all about improving his IT performance and really improving the perception of IT's performance in his environment. And we talked to him about 3 specific things. So the first was all about improving their problem resolution. So Sam was faced through his migration with an ever-mounting number of outages and incidents that need to be looked into, and they didn't really have an effective way of resolving those issues quickly. We also talked to him about picking the best key performance indicators to send back to the line of business and work with internally to help improve application delivery. And we also talked to him about building towards proper service level agreements for his data center for those applications in the hybrid environment. So there's three things around improving problem resolution that will help dramatically in this hybrid type of environment. The first one is really the highest value, and it's all about self-healing and automation. In Sam's environment, everything was manual, right? They had no scripts in place, no automated actions to try to recover any service. So if something went down in the middle of the night, it would potentially be a long time before it was actually looked at due to the reduced number of staff on and operations staff available to deal with the issues. Implementing a self-healing and automation engine that will handle the first level of triage on outages in your environment will have a huge impact on your data center. And unfortunately, only 16% of data centers today are able to get from a purely reactive point of view for outages into a proactive stance. So that's a pretty small number. So there's a lot of data centers still really challenged with this, and maybe even afraid of the idea of self-healing and automation. But the reality is that the complexity of these hybrid environments, again, that dynamicism, the things moving in and out of the cloud or across resources, these need to be in place to make the best use of that available capacity. So for example, some self-healing things that you'd want to look at, simply restarting services on a box. So maybe if an Apache server goes down or a website isn't responding, maybe just kickstart the service that's hosting that website. Restarting an IaaS application pool or restarting a server altogether, or even running some sort of customized script. Maybe it's a PowerShell script or a PHP or Bash script that will go out and trigger some type of complicated recovery action. It's very important to try to have a tool in place that will trigger that initial recovery action to bring things back up instantly. And then if it can't bring it back up, then move on to escalating the issue and actually alerting the administrators who are responsible for that system. In terms of escalation management, this also becomes very important, making sure that the right people are getting the right information at the right time. So making sure that if you do have one of these application outages, you don't want alerts going out for everything about that application in the event that one tier of the application is actually down. You want alerts to go out to the database team if the database is down, and then a general informational alert to go out to the other teams that are also hosting that application, so at least they know what's going on. But the important thing is avoiding spam messages and avoiding a sea of red in the event of outages. And that's where really topology recognition and inventory synchronization comes into play. You want to have a tool in place that will automatically recognize the topology of your environment, so which servers are depending on which switches, which VMs are depending on which ESX hosts are members of clusters, so on and so forth. And again, we talk about that synchronization, so having the tooling in place that will detect real-time changes to this topology, recognize that in the event of an error, only send an appropriate message to the people who are responsible for the failing tier versus sending out hundreds of alerts, right? So for example, if you had a core switch fail, you only want an alert to go out to the person who's responsible for that core switch, not to everyone who's attached to that switch, so any of the sub-switches and hundreds of servers potentially behind that. And all three of these things really play well into each other and really adding value into each of them. So if you have an effective self-healing engine that can automate a lot of the application recovery at a basic level, and if that doesn't work, things will be escalated to the appropriate team based on the topology that's known in the environment, and you can always be sure that that environment or the relationship between elements and servers is actually appropriate and up to date with the reality in your environment. If you can implement these three things, you will move into that proactive world of being able to manage these events before they become huge incidents and, again, improve your application service delivery in these cloud environments. The next thing to keep in mind is all about picking the best key performance indicators. So it's very traditional in data centers to have a report that is just all about infrastructure availability. My favorite one is that your server should be up 99.99% of the time, which is interesting, although not very valuable when it comes to delivering applications in these hybrid environments, because the reality is that many of these components are redundant, and many of these components will shift dynamically around a hybrid environment as there are infrastructure failures. So it becomes much more important to report on the actual availability of these applications and of these IT services from the end user's point of view. So being able to simulate their workflow through the application, for example, if it's a website, being able to simulate a user walking through that website. Maybe they need to log in, maybe they need to add something to their cart and check out. You want to be able to simulate that entire piece, and that's what you want to be reporting on back to the end users. You want to be reporting on the availability and response time of that transaction from the end user's point of view. Similar story for email simulation or any simulations on any other types of applications that you may be providing. Those are great metrics to spread out to the user base. Now internally, you want to make sure you're focusing on testing the whole application availability and performance. Of course, you want basic availability is the whole application up or down. You want easy visibility into some of the IT indicators, so mean time to recover, mean time before failure. In Sam's case, they really didn't have any of this tooling in place. So what ended up happening for them is that when there were complaints about IT and about the quality of applications, they didn't really have a defensible position. Right? They were left guessing or simply not able to dispute users' impression of what was going on with the applications. Once they got to a stage where they're able to monitor from the end user's point of view and report back to the users on that, and then also track their own internal indicators to gauge their performance overall, they were in a much better position and able to prove back to the business that IT was actually performing well, and in areas where it wasn't, clearly identify where the improvements need to be made. And all these metrics come back to being able to set realistic goals. It's very common that we'll talk to users who basically just draw a line in the sand on some of these indicators and just pick a number without having any visibility into what their real world performance has been in the past or how it's trending. So they end up setting themselves up for failure right from the beginning, which is something Sam ended up doing, and it was detrimental overall to that reputation of the IT department. So being able to track all of these pieces and report on them as these applications are migrating from traditional stacks to hybrid stacks, that will give you the key indicators you need to prove that your application migrations are working effectively and that you're still delivering services or delivering them more effectively, getting that bang for buck out of the hybrid environment that you were promised. Now the last piece in Sam's mission here, so once you're able to get to that proactive stage and automatically heal, once you're able to properly track all of their key performance indicators and report back to that or report back to end users and line of business users on that, they really want to push towards service level agreements. So building highly valuable user-facing agreements to determine what the quality of service will be in their environment. And I went through 3 basic steps to get here. So the first step was all about trying to track their IT service availability. So this is what I talked about earlier, taking all of the reporting and availability numbers away from the infrastructure components and bringing them up into that IT service level. This is just a simple report showing the availability of these different IT services over a certain time window. Great thing to send out to all the stakeholders in your organization, just to prove at a high level what the status of these different services are. The second step is being able to track that operational health. So I mentioned a number of those key performance indicators. So you'll want to be able to report on your mean time before failure, your incident top 20s, which servers are having the most problems within each of these applications. So if there is an application that's suffering and not as available as you want it to be, you can quickly see what are the top 20 components that are failing most frequently or which one have the longest downtime in your environment. Being able to easily report on these will give you a functional to-do list, a kind of hot list of things that you need to go look at in your environment to help improve your overall availability. Once you have that information, it also helps to be able to gauge what's the value of these different pieces. So clearly there's a static amount of resource that you can apply to solving problems. What you really want to be able to do is look at your operational health and group availability numbers and key indicators into different buckets based on priority. In this example, incident priority quadrant, what we've done for Sam is actually shown on a server-by-server basis which ones are having the most number of failures, so maybe 20 failures over a month, and which ones are having the highest time down, right? So maybe something was down for 10 hours out of a week, it would be higher priority. By simply bucketing the different availability pieces into this quadrant, you can quickly focus on which things are the right ones to focus on first. So if we had a number of incidents in the upper right, that would mean that we had a number of servers that not only were failing a lot or higher than other servers, but they were also down for much longer. So clearly those are the things you want to go look at right away. And over time, you can start to look at this quadrant and see server availability start shifting down further and further to the bottom left, where you're having a low number of outages, and those outages are for a very minimal amount of time. So this is a great tool to actually gauge if your self-healing, if your escalation processes, your topology pieces are all working to actually help you deliver your IT services more effectively. And the third step for Sam was all about being able to report on your actual SLA achievement. And we walked him through 3 different layers of reporting on SLAs. The first layer was just being able to get a quick overview. So for example, if we had an SLA that was over a week-long period, how did we do day to day? Were we achieving our SLAs? In this case, our e-commerce SLA has failed every day of the week. Clearly, that's a major problem. This report would go out to all of the managers in the company, maybe to the executives, certainly to Sam himself to gauge how he's doing on his SLAs. It's an indicator of there being problems that need to go and be investigated. Clearly, this SLA is not doing very well. We'd be hitting all of our penalty numbers for sure. Right, we would go one level deeper, which is getting more details on which components of each of these SLAs were failing. So in this example, it's actually a very straightforward SLA. We have a service level objective for just overall outages in the environment, and we only have one piece that's actually being checked. But we can see day by day exactly when each component, if you had a dozen of them, you'd see 12 different lines here, when each component that was making this SLA was actually failing and how that contributed to the overall downtime. And specifically, when were the outages, how long were each of those outages, when did they stop and finish. It's a great operational stance on the SLAs to let you drill down into more detail and combine this with some of the other reports available on your service delivery. Of course, the last piece, now that you're able to report on your SLAs on a weekly or monthly or daily basis, you should also have that information in a dashboard, publicly visible. In this example, with all the SLAs that Sam was managing are listed, and you're able to clearly see within the current compliance period which SLAs are failing, which ones are in a warning state, meaning that they're trending toward failing in the environment and need to be looked at, and which ones are okay. And this is kind of the next step up from that application dashboard where you're simply viewing the live status. This is now actually reporting on your high-level service delivery back to anyone who's consuming these services. So with all of these things in place, it becomes much easier to actually prove to the business that IT is doing its job and you're effectively delivering services. You have a reporting set that you're able to send out to all the stakeholders. You have live operational views of your status, and internally within IT, you have quick lists of where to focus in your environment to get the best bang for buck for your resources to improve your IT service delivery. So again, these 3 steps, 3 basic things to help improve IT performance, things that are generally good but also become much more valuable in a hybrid type environment, improving that problem resolution, really ironing out the kinks in previous manual processes that you get away with in relatively static environments. They're simply not acceptable in the new world of dynamic, constantly changing IT environments. Being able to pick those best performance indicators and communicate those back to users and track your own internal indicators versus good external indicators such as the end user experience on these applications. And then how to build towards your service level agreement so you can track your achievement over time and show long-term historical trends in service level delivery to prove that you are actually meeting your IT goals. And with that, we're going to pause for another survey.
Great. So if we can pop up the next survey question. And with this one, we want to find out how far along the SLA path are you today. So just pick the one best answer. Are you doing no SLA tracking? Perhaps basic infrastructure SLAs are in place. You might do it on a project that's in you have an SLA project in progress. You have one planned in the next 12 months, or you have full IT service SLAs in place now. So we'll let folks, give people a few seconds to vote. We're getting a lot of good questions, so continue to send those in. We'll have some time at the end. And again, just a quick reminder, there's a lot of resources available to take away after you leave. Go to the resource folder, and as I mentioned before, there's a link to a 30-day free trial, the PowerPoint slides to today's presentation, an IT systems monitoring checklist, an IT systems monitoring cost calculator. So a lot of good things there. So before we push them out, any guesses, David? What are you seeing in the market right now? What do you think would be the highest, our top pick here?
Very likely either a project in the next 12 months or basic infrastructure SLAs in place. And what I mean by basic is that you're doing just sort of up and down availability on those infrastructure components instead of the applications.
All right. Well, why don't we see what the results are? Pretty good.
That was kind of close.
A lot of people are doing no tracking. That's interesting too. So.
Yeah, so there's a lot of people who want to get to SLA, and the reality of SLAs is that they are somewhat more of an advanced IT topic, and certainly they are largely misunderstood in a number of data centers. So those who are doing it are having mixed results, but it is a very important piece to be able to, again, show back to the end users and the stakeholders that performance of IT and prove that you're consistently delivering on your SLAs through this migration to a hybrid environment.
Okay. All right, well, I'll turn it back to you for, we've got a few more points to make, and then we'll come back for the Q&A.
I think we're actually going to jump right into the Q&A at this point.
Okay. All right, good. Well, again, keep sending in the questions. We'll have some time. I think we've got, we can get to a lot of them here. Okay, so I'll just go through a couple. Some are pretty general, some are very specific. What about monitoring cloud elements?
Well, cloud elements from an ideal point of view should be treated just like any other physical resource, right? So you'd want to include those in your monitoring framework. They certainly shouldn't be treated any differently than a physical server. That's the idea, that they just replace a physical resource, right? Uptime is fully able to monitor all of those cloud resources, regardless of whether they're on Amazon or Rackspace or any other of the major providers. You're able to pull those into that single view dashboard, just like any other server.
All right. One question is Uptime agent-based?
Uptime provides both agentless and agent-based solutions. So where there's public APIs available, for example, either WMI interfaces for Windows environments, or the VMware vSphere API for virtualized environments, or any network device with SNMP. There are a number of different agentless options. What we do also offer is a lightweight uptime agent that really helps to facilitate a number of those self-healing abilities. So that ability to restart services or run custom scripts on the target host, as well as get a deeper sense of the performance internals within each of those OSs hosting the uptime agent. That's where it adds a lot of its value. So you can either choose agentless or agent-based and mix and match however you like in your environment. Okay,
a couple more. Do CPU workloads correspond with virtualization environments and production environments? How do they differ?
Well, in Uptime's case, it doesn't differ a great deal, right? So certainly, if you're migrating, let's say, an application that was hosted on a physical resource, and you're going to migrate that to a virtual resource, that example report that I displayed where you're able to see a breakdown of kind of megahertz by megahertz consumption, you should be able to track that application workload as it transitions from one architecture to another and accurately see whether you're getting the same type of performance you thought you would. Maybe you get far fewer megahertz consumption on the virtual infrastructure. Maybe you don't. Maybe it goes the other direction. But you should be able to relate that back to one of those front-end metrics. So if we want to talk about, at an infrastructure level, the number of users logged into the application on that VM, you should be able to relate that front-end metric back to the actual megahertz usage and trend out over time whether there is a change in workload and if that change needs to be accounted for in your capacity allocation.
All right. So here's one. Can you actually monitor software-specific applications like the RDP server or an application that runs on an SQL database?
Yeah, absolutely. So Uptime provides monitoring of all the major tiers. So certainly all the popular databases are supported. A number of different application middle tiers are supported. Different Java layers, different software layers. RDP is supported as a monitoring piece, right? And then also we're able to do say more software specific pieces depending on the type of software in question. That'd be a great question to ask during a one-on-one demo that we can schedule for you if you like.
Okay. Here's a direct one. How much does Uptime cost? How do you license this?
Uptime's licensed on a per element basis, right? There's no modules, no enterprise version, no special upgrades that you need to keep in mind. It's one blanket price per element, right? So an element would be, let's just say a server instance, right? Maybe it's an LPAR, maybe it's a VM, maybe it's a physical resource. You're going to pay $99 for that resource, and you get as many reports, as many metrics, as many monitors as you want on that target for no additional cost. And of course, there is a volume discount structure as you get up, into the hundreds or thousands of servers mark.
Okay. I have a question that wasn't, as we're getting more in here. Could you just talk, I was curious if you could just put this into perspective a bit about, there's definitely an increased need for availability for all types of applications. So is this driving people to look for more approaches like this and definitely for SLAs to sort of back up that they are indeed providing the services they claim to be providing?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think the major transition in architecture of applications has really opened up a lot of challenges and a lot of need to kind of track performance that wasn't necessarily there before, right? So there are a lot of applications that were running just happily on hardware, right, or on physical resources, and everything was fine. But now that they're actually migrating across to different architectures, there's a certain gap in the availability to report on, is that application still functioning correctly. So I think it's reopening the conversation about how you track that availability in your environment and who needs to know. Certainly many of these hybrid environments, or let's say internal cloud environments, are becoming much more transparent to normal end users as they become kind of more technical and more able to spin up their own services in a self-service fashion, right? So being able to report back to, let's say, non-IT savvy users about the status of how IT is actually doing is becoming much more important now.
Okay, great. I think I want to wrap this up. We're running out of time, and I don't want to keep people beyond the top of the hour. So I want to just remind everyone that before you go, a couple of things. Take the survey for us, please. We'd really appreciate getting a little more insight into the issues you're dealing with. We have a number of resources, as I mentioned. Please use that. There's the IT System Monitoring Checklist. There's a link to the 30-day free trial, a copy of today's slides, and an IT Monitoring Cost Calculator. So a lot of good stuff there. Additionally, if you want to revisit the seminar or replay parts of it, it's available on demand starting tomorrow. So go to the eSeminarsLive.com website, and you'll be able to use the same login credentials you had today and replay it on demand. If you have a colleague that you think is interested, you can just share the link. If they're registered with our system, they can watch it on demand, or they may need to just re-register. We cover this topic a lot. We have a lot of additional seminars coming up. So if you are interested in this type of information, please check out the upcoming events section of the eSeminarsLive.com website. With that, I want to say thank you, David. Great presentation, a lot of good information today. So thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, everyone.
I want to thank Uptime Software for sponsoring today's event. Additionally, I just want to thank everyone who attended. We had a good crowd, a lot of good questions, good participation in the polls. So thank you, everyone. I know your time is valuable. And with that, I'll sign off. This is Sal Salamone for Quinn